Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about The Secret of Kells from 2009. And this is a winner of my Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. And this winner was selected by a guy named Crystal. I'm watching this film after having seen pretty much all of, except for Breadwinner, all of Cartoon Saloon's films, all of Tom Moore's films, having seen them all for a while, and having seen this film, honestly, a few times. And I think this film, if I were to have reviewed it when this came out, it would be different how I'm reviewing it now, obviously. But when I look at it more of a thesis statement to all of Cartoon Saloon, in particular Tom Moore's work. Because it's very much about, it's obviously the beginning of his Irish folklore trilogy, as he calls it, I believe, with Song of the Sea and Wolfwalkers. But I think it also shows something that's really important to him as a filmmaker and the studio, in that they really care about taking traditions from Irish culture and passing them on to a new generation, which is much what the Book of Kells, or the Secret of Kells, which is the Book of Kells. I guess that's the what. Is that I assume that's the secret. Anyway, I guess it's not a secret. Is a secret? Oh fuck! What is the secret? I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the Book of Kells, the whole idea of the Book of Kells is to take what is going on in their lives, take on that knowledge, and pass it on to a future generation, using both literature or the written word, as well as illustrations in that style. I think it's called. Using the illuminators would do this drawing to communicate their world and their belief system and pass something on. And I think animation, compared to any film medium, has the ability to not be dated on it. Like, I might know the date of a big animated movie, but you can show it to a kid now. I can show my kids Totoro, and Totoro's a new movie, Same with all the Disney stuff, and same with this. It's to them, this film isn't a film from 2009. It can live on, and you can pass stories and pass legend and pass history on to new generations. I know that is a thing that they're into. I also know because when I reviewed Song of the Sea, Tom Moore liked that review when I made it a long time ago and retweeted it and agreed with me, or agreed that I was right what he was doing, I guess. I always sort of like that about them, both as more so when I saw Song of the Sea, I was not a father, but as I now am a father of two kids, I do think about what they're going to take with them and what you're going to leave behind and stuff. And I think as you look at a kid, the main character in this, Brendan has to choose between the now, building this wall, or helping with the Book of Kells. And I think this film sort of answers into what is important in the long run, but is also important now. I think it is also 100% the thesis statement before the essay. Not that their other films are bad or something, I don't mean it that way, but the thesis statement of what auteur theory of Tom Moore is trying to do, which is pass these stories on and explain Irish history and folklore. And in a way, I think this is probably the most in the history itself, using the design and the framing and everything going on with it. This feels more stuck in that. It almost feels like Wolfwalkers is years later is the more complete, little more mainstream version of what this is. But I think what this is saying is the power to be able to tell those stories and how important it is to always protect those things and keep on your traditions for future generations, but while also understanding there are evils and things to worry about in the present. Secret of Kells is about a kid named Brendan who lives in a village that is trying to build a wall around itself to fight off the Northmen, which when I first saw this, I didn't know that term as well as because of that movie and stuff, but are Vikings who they know are going to come and destroy their village. At the same time, there is the Illuminators who are trying to kind of make the book that turns darkness into light, and keep working on the unfinished in this book, Book of Kells, until Aiden arrives and he continues to help Brendan, who's very much into this, although his father, the abbot, very much is against this because he wants him to work on the wall so he can hopefully protect the village from being destroyed. Although Abbott and Aiden both agree that this is still important. They're more important on trying to save these lives, and they try to kind of have this argument between what is going on in the village and how he needs to adhere to the community at hand, while also be able to tell these stories and help able to illustrate and do the kind of art style that is known for the Book of Kells, or help with the illuminated manuscript or the kind of illustrated manuscript of the Book of Kells, and how he is kind of showing more interest and showing a real knack at sort of doing that, while at the same time he is also meets a fairy in the forest named Cleach, I think, and kind of gets into that world and gets into monsters and pagan gods and all these things within it. Well, he's trying to kind of illustrate the world around him to kind of continue to tell the Book of Kells. The Book of Kells itself is actually a gospel book. I don't think this is sort of not super religious and get into that. I'm not religious myself. I didn't actually know that the various times I've watched this, so I assume it's not the biggest deal. I don't know why they took that out necessarily. I'd have to hear, Tom Moore probably has spoken on that at some point. But I don't think it's necessarily a religious film, but you could say all films are religious in a certain regard, but I don't think it is. I do like the animation style, which is based on the illuminated, as it's called, manuscript. That was the term, kind of the illustration at the time. Sometimes they'll do interesting things with framing where they had like 3 things across the frame, the various like circles and stuff like this. When I first saw it, I thought this was like far artier than I was like, how will this studio like ever break out? Like, this just seems like sort of artistically impenetrable. And sometimes I think like Wolfwalkers I get very into. I feel like of the trilogy I get more into them as it goes on. This one I do find a little more impenetrable. Just visually it's just a lot, not something I'm very used to, and I don't know if there is a lot going on even reading this, and I do feel like maybe they learned a lot being storytellers and stuff, and it feels like Wolfwalkers simplified a lot of this. Does feel like sort of like a rougher version of what Wolfwalkers would be later, but I don't know, I do like it and I love the design of it actually, especially on this watch, but as I keep observing it I like it more and more. But the first time I remember going like, whoa, what is going on? Like, this is very interesting, and like it's definitely memorable, and it's very different and odder and weirder than you'd expect from the other folklore films. Now I don't actually maybe think it's like odd, because there's a point to that. He's doing the manuscripts and kind of showing what Brendan is going to be drawing in the thing, and like you can understand that art style and understand that world, and understanding that world through the art of the time is actually pretty sophisticated and interesting idea, or maybe just a simple idea, but it's a cool idea, and I actually do like that he does it. But I just couldn't get as into it, even though I have actually shown this to my kids, and I do like watching this movie. It just, I don't know, it's something about it, like, never get fully immersed, and maybe that's my own problem. This film really broke out for me, and I think for most people. I had not heard of it until it was nominated for Best Animated Feature. Best Animated Feature used to be a really cool category, and they nominate some small animated film that would never get the kind of attention, so it's actually kind of wonderful. And this was one of those, like Ernest and Celestine, like Chico and Rita, among them. And this one was a real one that like surprised people, and I think in America I never heard this many people talk about Cartoon Saloon before this and this film, so I think it definitely worked out. It's a shame they don't nominate more smaller films, they just kind of do big studios now, but it was a film that really benefited from that actually, and I'm kind of happy it did kind of like launch new talent in America in a lot of ways. I don't know, I do think the interesting idea of what the Abbott's doing, and I've heard people say like, well, what he was doing was a total failure, and what Brendan should have been just doing is the Book of Kells. I don't think that's necessarily the point. I think it's like, I actually think the whole idea of the Abbott and Aiden and like that whole argument, the one thing I find most interesting is like, in the end, it's like they both had important roles to do, and I think it's like, you as the storyteller or the artist should understand what is important and how to balance both at certain regards. I don't think the Viking or the Northman attack is Brendan's fault or something, but dealing with the real world is something you have to do as well as communicate your art, and that's often a very hard, difficult thing to navigate and do. And I think that's within this film, it kind of shows both sides. As much as you think it favors the book, it's kind of also like, well, yeah, but he had to protect his village in some regard, even if he didn't really succeed, he still tried, and I think that's part of it. This is actually a pretty magnificent little movie, and I often quite like it. I like how like they fight like the little demons and fairies and stuff in this. Is really creative and kind of shows like what's going on in the kid's head, and especially going through artistic expression and stuff. Also, the idea of how important it is to kind of communicate your voice and your experience, I think, is very much within this film. I think it's actually good to show kids so they understand how it is important to do that and tell that to future generations of what this was. And especially the more technology has changed, because obviously like by the end of this, like, you know, how many people could even read? I mean, I don't think Brendan can read in this. I was like, they had to use illustrations to like convey certain things. Now it's so easy to communicate. You know, you're watching me in this video and stuff. Like that, this was impossible those years ago, and not everyone could. And look how much has changed since then. And I think it shows, like, even if you have the technology or not, it is important, just as important as building that wall against the Northmen to communicate and how they can live on and stuff. And I'm not saying like everyone has amazing knowledge that will live on for infinity, but it is good to like kind of keep that legacy and keep that knowledge going past, you know, the initial kind of burst of it. And I think it's, you know, it shows how a director like Tom Moore is able to keep telling these stories like a good old storyteller and like an illustrated manuscript. I mean, maybe animation is the illustrated or the illuminated manuscript of its time in a way. It definitely treats it that way. And I think that's a real interesting thing for an animation studio to do. I still do like this film. I do find it a little harder to get into. I think my kids are fine with it, but it is a little more interesting creatively and artistically, visually, than you really expect from something like this. You know, I think Wolf Walkers brings that down and makes it a little more digestible, but I think this is kind of unapologetic in what it's trying to do. I think maybe the other films, unless you know what's going on there, you wouldn't realize that they are trying to teach your children Irish folklore and continue their traditions going. This very much feels like it. You kind of can't ignore that. But I think maybe, I think he's probably, in a lot of ways, a better filmmaker past this film. But I also think like what he was doing is really, really interesting. I sort of wish sometimes when I see the newer ones, if I didn't love that visual style, and I don't think it, like, I fell into it as much. I mean, some of the frame, there's so many different weird drawings going on in the background and stuff. It's like kind of delicious to look at, but it also feels like overwhelming and also feels like a mess. But I also kind of like it. I don't know. This is sort of a well-bodied, like, very smart way to pass on tradition from one to the other, and the importance of doing that. And I think, you know, you usually see this kind of film at the end of a career. It'd be like, this is what I was saying the whole time. And having it be a director at the beginning, like the first one, kind of shows you like how kind of clear it was, is like, this is what I'm trying to do. And he's continued to do that. So it's definitely an interesting film to rewatch or watch now that the other films have come out, because you realize what they were saying is why they made the Book of Kells and why they made the Secret of Kells, and it's all the same thing, to hopefully continue on the experience and hopefully be able to communicate that to future generations and people long past when we're all here, and the kind of glory and beauty and the importance of doing that. So if you've seen The Secret of Kells and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And this was a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. Thank you very much for watching.